Hello and welcome back to Off Track Podcast with me, Dave Neal. My guest this week is a three-time winner of the Suzuka 8-Hour Championship, multiple runner-up in the World Superbike Championship, multiple race winner, and a real great guy. Before we get started, make sure you like and subscribe. If you enjoy what we do, then please do hit that subscribe button below. And also, if you click the description, the drop-down box, scroll down a little bit, there's the link for our Patreon page. If you'd like to help the show out on a monthly basis, get early access to our guests and the chance to ask them questions, click on the Patreon link and the options are there for a monthly subscription. Anyway, that's enough from me. Can't wait for this one. He's an absolute legend. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the brilliant Aaron Slight. Enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to Off Track the superb Aaron Slight. Aaron, welcome to Off Track. So good to see you. How are you, mate?
Very good, Dave. Yeah, very good. Funny the way we met, but yeah, that's all good.
Oh, massive thanks to Pete Donaldson for introducing us. It's crazy how our little world of motorcycle racing works, isn't it?
Oh, it is, and that's the great thing about motorcycling that I love is that yeah, everybody has a different story. You know, like even when you're riding along, you know, you get to the top of the hill and everybody's talking about their ride. It doesn't matter if you're me, nearly world champion, or you're the guy that's the slowest up the hill. You've all got a story, and it's all good fun.
And that's the great thing, because you're still very active on the bike, aren't you? You still get out on your enduro trails. You've got a busy life post racing. Tell me what's going on in the world of Aaron Slight post racing.
Well, yeah, I retired in 2000 after my brain bleed there, and you know, which was a really, really hard way to finish my career. You know, that year I felt like way back then I felt like I was let down by Honda. As in, you know, I had my brain bleed and then I had surgery and then came back to racing and was starting to find my feet. But looking back, I can see what was happening. You know, that most of the money was going over to MotoGP then because they were going four-stroke. And, you know, Superbikes was losing a bit of funding. And also, you know, when you go to Japan, you don't see many disabled people. And having a brain injury, I'm not sure that the Japanese trusted, you know, who I was going to be again after that. You know, was I going to get back to where I was or whatever. But as it turned out, you know, 34 I think is probably about the age. You know, 34 is probably about the age you start losing those fine motor skills, all that sort of stuff starts to slow down. And you know, there's been a lot of guys since my retirement that I've looked back at and just gone, I wish you'd stay home. You know, they're always waiting for the next weekend and they think they're going to get back to their greatness, but they never do. They're there or thereabouts, doing a great job, but just need to, you know, and if I was in the same situation, I don't know how I would have retired. So looking back, might have been a little bit of a blessing. But yeah, since retiring, I've been retired since, you know, for 25 years now. And I was really, really lucky that while I was racing, all I was doing was focusing on racing and you know, Superbikes was great in the 90s. So good paydays. So it was just going all into the bank. You know, I wasn't buying sports cars. I wasn't buying anything special. And yeah, I came back home and made some really good investments, and that's enabled me just to be able to have fun on my adventure bikes. And I just actually unpacked a new motocross bike today. So yeah, a bit of motocross, well, trail riding, and stuff like that. So yeah, just I don't do anything 8 to 5, but I'm flat out.
You're as busy. I find a lot of riders and people in general, when it comes to retirement, whether it's by choice or by design, you're busier than ever.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, you know, one of the other things is you know how do you retire? But you know, after actually retiring, how do you get on with life? Like, life has been so hugely busy and so stressful and so amazing that you now have to be normal. You have to be, you know, like normal people. And, you know, people were bowing and scraping before you, and now you're just one of the people in the street. So how, you know, I think for me, being a New Zealander and, you know, and when I first started racing, I was probably one of the only professional sports people in New Zealand. So there's not a book on how to manage yourself or whatever, and what you do after racing, and you know, there's all these stories now coming out from rugby players and suffering depression and all that sort of stuff. It's all coming out now, and these are things that I was probably going through myself. You know, discovering yourself after giving up racing, you come back to your little old hometown, and you're not getting paid the big dollars anymore. You're not getting, all these different things. And so how do you fill those gaps?
Ruben Zhao said the same thing a couple of weeks ago. He was always aware that his time away from racing was going to be greater than the time he spent racing when the time to retire comes. And it's how you deal with that, because when you're in the middle of it, it feels like it's going to last forever. And then there comes a point where, as we say, whether it was through design or by nature, all of a sudden you've got to try and replace that thrill of racing, replace that adrenaline and the adulation of the crowd, the bubble that you're in, especially as a factory Honda rider. It's difficult to find a way to replace that.
Yeah, for sure. And I couldn't even watch racing when I finished. For about 5 years, I never even rode a motorbike. I couldn't watch the race. I couldn't watch Troy Corser win the championship in 2002 when I was beating him in 99, 98, 2000. And, I just couldn't watch it because, why wasn't I still doing it? I couldn't watch my old teammate, Colin Edwards, go on to MotoGP. I couldn't. And then, as I said before, I couldn't watch them fade out of the business either. And how do you retire? It was just hard to watch because I still felt that I could be amongst it and still have the pace. And then, even just watching other people have fun. Why are you on the sideline? Why are you not coming out of Krona curves with a back wheel sliding and whatever gear and having that fun? Why isn't it me? It's just all those sort of questions. It was really, really hard.
I can't, and like you say, there's no help at the time because it was just, that's it, you're done, off you go. And the sport continues to move forward at a pace that you soon get left behind, and through no fault of your own. So it's an unusual situation with our sport because everybody's just looking for the next practice session, the next race, the next season, and time passes by so quickly. And this is why it's so good to have you on the podcast to find out what you've been up to in the interim years. And it doesn't feel like 25 years. Is it with time and tide waits for no man? But my God, when you say it's 25 years, you suddenly go, oh shit, that's half my age nearly.
Yeah. And so I've been out of the sport longer than I was in it, and that's the other thing, coming back to New Zealand, I sort of do some ambassadorial roles with the National Race Series here and stuff like that. And people, people know who you are and you've been around and all that sort of thing. And they talk about the racing in New Zealand and when I started, and I look back and I was only raced in New Zealand for 3 years. I wasn't around in New Zealand for a long time because I was moving on. I went to Australia, I went to Japan, I was trying to get to Europe. And people, they all know you and your story because you're full frontal. But you might have only met those people, 10 times over your whole life. And that's really difficult too. Remember me? Well, not really. So there's a lot of that goes on. But I think the other thing is that too, you could just walk away and not have anything to do with it. But I think there's still a story. There's still something to give back. I think there's still they like doing these things that somebody will get something out of it. Somebody will love it. And that's what's so good about it. And listening to other people's stories. But because you've just dropped off the face of the earth, you actually you do carry on. You're not dead to the world. You're doing something useful and doing other things.
There's still a life outside there, and this is why it's such a privilege to do the podcast and to tell the stories. And it's great that you could sit down and join us for this. With the like you say about working in New Zealand and life after racing. Before we go into the career and the great highlights that you had, you're working with a lot of younger riders now, and the great way is that it's on your terms and it's your choice to do it because, as you said before, not really following racing for 5 years and adjusting to life outside. Now you can give back to the lady racers, to Cormac Buchanan. You've got a lot to give the sport still.
Hey, can I take a break? I just want to turn the heater off.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
easy.
You can edit it out.
Oh, we can edit this easy. No problem at all.
Yep, back. That's the thing. When I got back to New Zealand, it was, what are you going to do? What does it entail? And I actually hooked up with the Honda importer in New Zealand. So New Zealand Honda isn't owned by Honda. It's a private company. So I hooked up with them and was an ambassador to Honda in New Zealand. And they gave me a small feeling of being involved with motorcycling without really being involved. And so there was a lot of track days and all that sort of stuff which people do, and I just got a bit bored with the whole track day thing because, once people get to that level of racing who can follow you around on a decent line and a decent pace, they actually know what they're doing. They've just got to get their craft going and more miles. And I sort of liked the more learner rider, the person who couldn't actually make it to the racetrack safely on the road. They get a lot more out of it. Where I would get people turning up to a day, and a lady turn up on a bike and her front brake would pull straight into the handlebar, but she didn't think she needed a front brake because she's got a back brake. Stuff like that. You feel like you're giving back a bit more. And then with Avalon Biddle, when I first came back, she was just starting racing, and I used to be on the track, and she'd follow me around the race line, and I'd follow her around and things like that. And this was going back years, and she just went on to be a really, really great rider. And her story, it's hard. New Zealand's hard work. Coming from here to get to Europe, and she went to Europe and she did the CB 500 Cup and all sorts of things over there and did really well. And I think it was the European Women's Championship. And so helping her this year, when they announced they were going to have a Women's World Championship, I rang her and said, "You've got to go." And Avalon's now 32, just had her first baby, so her career is, she's almost over. But it was just for me, she just had to be there because she's just been such a wonderful lady and to work with, and just as a human being, let alone a racer. And I thought, she doesn't need to miss out on this opportunity. So that was why I wanted to get involved with Avalon, and it was really cool. And even on the weekend in Assen, I'm texting on don't forget the Assen, the track dries quickly. Don't go out on wets. Go out and trying to give as much information as I can from home. So that's been quite fun. And so that's trying to help the younger people. But how do you do it? I don't know. It's a real hard one, really, because you can help some people, and you've just actually got to go through do the hard yards, really, because at the end of the day, if you're not up to it, you're not up to it, and you can help out everybody in the world, but there's only a few people make it.
Oh, that's always been the case, hasn't it? I think more so these days, where there's a lot more opportunities for younger riders to prove themselves, and they're all of a standard, but there's only a very small handful can get through to Moto3, to Moto2, to MotoGP. And it is hard. And the sport's changed so much as well in the time that you've retired from 2000 to 2025. The landscape has changed immeasurably, but it's still riding a bike. That's the essential bit that you can bring.
Yeah, for sure. And the cream always rises to the top. I mean, you're looking at MotoGP, looking at the Marquez brothers and where they came from and whatever. It's been a lot of people go before them, but it's the ones that do have that natural talent, and that when they pull the visor down, they are angry people or whatever. There's a whole lot of things got to happen, and it's not everybody can do it.
How have you seen Cormac Buchanan? How his progress has gone so far? Because I think he's had a great start to Moto3 this year.
Well, see, the thing with Cormac is they've had a plan. They've really had a plan, and they've stuck to a plan, which is just amazing. I can't believe how they, we're going to go and do this, and this is how we're going to do it. I mean, it's changed year to year a little bit. They pick up a little bit more information and go down a different route with somebody else as a manager or whatever. But they've just got a plan, and they haven't held back in New Zealand and been done the national series to be the New Zealand champion and then going somewhere else. They've shortcutted straight to Spain. But this stuff costs big money, and these are just normal people in New Zealand, just normal people with 8 to 5 jobs, and they've got sat down and and made a plan. I think I'm in awe of that, because we talked about it the other day, and I had never had a plan at all. I never thought I could be a professional racer. I never thought I could win the New Zealand Championship. I never thought I could go to Australia. I never wanted to travel and all those sort of things. That just my plans eventuated, 6 months at a time, where they seem to have stuck to like a 5-year plan, and they're making it work, which is amazing. And to see him go to the first round and get points in the first round, although some people did fall over, still got points the next round. Then he started, getting close to the, qualifying the front bunch. Bit of a shame on the weekend he fell off, but go to some tracks now that he knows. Who knows what would happen.
Yeah, we've got Jerez next, haven't we? And he's got experience around there from Red Bull rookies, so it'll be interesting to see how he rolls out from that one. And I'm looking forward to seeing his progress this year. He came across quite aggressive on the Red Bull rookies documentary, and you sort of watch it thinking, I'm not quite sure from a character point of view. He's a spiky little bugger on that documentary, but the boy can ride.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but every time I've seen him in front of public and talked to him, he's got a very professional way about him, and like he's been schooled. He's been schooled on this whole thing, and so I'm sure maybe that Red Bull rookie things, maybe that was a bit early on, and he might get his interview a bit better, but that only shows some balls. And then, I mean, you don't want to go to you don't want to turn up at the World Championship and everybody thinks they can piss all over you. So that's great. We'll see what happens.
It's that age group of 16 and 17. It's all peacock and flexing and piss and tatty-watter, as they say.
Yeah.
Tell me about the early days. Where did it all start? Because it's not easy, as Simon Crafar we've spoken to over the years, to make it big in New Zealand and then head to Australia and then onto the world stage. Tell me about the early days for Aaron Slight.
Well, see, the other thing about the early days for us here in New Zealand is, I look at Rossi's career and or a lot of English people, but, in Rossi's career, he was 15 and 16 doing the World Championship. You can pack up your transit van and enter the World Championship back then with, you didn't have to win any championships or whatever. You got an entry and you were there, and from little old New Zealand, there was no way of doing anything international. So it was a long, I wasn't aiming to be at the World Championship. I was aiming to do the best I could do where I was, and that was New Zealand, Australia, Japan, whatever the path would take. But just so many things fell into place for me. It was just amazing, really. But starting way back, my family, nothing to do with motorsport at all. My father, I think, rode a scooter to work for about a year, and that was about this whole motorcycle involvement. And we went on a family holiday, and there was those little True Test motorbikes in the old days, little Lumo engines in a little frame, and they were hiring them out. And I said to my dad I wanted to go and ride them, and we'll go and do it on Monday, and Monday never came, So the holiday ended and we were back at home. Never got to ride a motorbike, and then my uncle was actually into big bikes. He did, had the Z900s and things like that, and he had a GT MX80 Yamaha that was given to him as a payment for something, and it was just sitting in the shed. So my dad said, "Well, if you're really into these motorbikes, why don't you go and ask him to borrow that?" So even that was hard work for me. It took me a month to pluck up the courage to ask to borrow this motorbike. And so he gave it to me and said, no worries, here's the bike, go to it. And we were lucky that we lived with a paddock behind us. And once again, my dad, not knowing anything about motorcycles, said, oh, well, you can ride the bike, and, for the first week, you can ride around in first gear, and, someone's got to watch you and someone's got to do this. And so within about 3 days, they were all bored with it. So on the fourth day, I stuck it into the fence and had to come home and ask someone to help me pull it out of the 8-wire fence because it was stuck in between the knobblies and things like that. So that's where it started. And then I started sneaking down the river with it, down the river track. And while I was down the river track, a friend, or became a friend, came along and said, you should come to the races this weekend. It's on Sunday. There's a local motocross meeting. So I went home and told my folks about that, and that's what started the motocross career. I went to the local track, which is about 20 kilometres out of town, and that's where my number originated from. We got to the local track, and they said, "Well, you can't enter without you can't be lap scored without a number." So my dad, not being very mechanically minded or anything like that, said, "Well, I've got some insulation tape here. So we'll just go zip, 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 and here's your number, 111, because you can't do 7, you can't do 1. Too many got those, so we'll just do this. So that was my first number, was number 111. It was made of 3 pieces of insulation tape. So that's where it started, and then I slowly took the family around into going to more races, and we then bought a new bike. And back then I was going to get a YZ80D, which is back in those days, and the D model was the last year's model, and the E model was coming out. So we didn't know you had to have the latest thing. So I was going to get the D model because it was $499, not $550. But the local shop talked us into the E model, and then from there on we started schoolboy motocross, and which was a great family thing. Looking back at it, I had an older sister, and the family, we used to travel to the motorbikes, and everybody sort of did have fun, and it was about having fun. And then we started doing more long distance trips, well, a couple of hours, so probably do 2 races a month. So every second weekend, one in Wellington and one in Masterton. Then I did the junior championships. Then suddenly had a New Zealand championship, which we entered, and but I was the guy that went there with the bike with the standard, had the tyres on that we bought it with, no new tyres or anything like that. So never ran at the front really. Didn't really realise that we needed to have new tyres. It was just about the fun. And I think I had about a 6th in the New Zealand Championship, something like that. Like, wasn't at the front. The kids that were at the front were probably the ones with the dads who knew a bit more about the mechanical side of it. So I did that until I was quite a small kid. So rode 80cc bikes until I was 15. Then got on to a 125, where most kids had changed before that. And then suddenly it was just go to work and ride motorbikes, party on the weekend. And then it was like, oh, well, can't afford to do both. Gave up motorbikes, but started working in a bike shop because I wanted to buy a car. But the bike shop owner they were right into their sidecars, so road racing sidecars. And so they had sidecar outfits with TZ750s in it. So I used to work on all their bike engines and stuff for their sidecar, and they said to me one day, well, why don't you have a go at this road racing thing? And that was when the RZs just came out. So started riding RZ250, RZ350, and production racing in New Zealand was huge in those days, and it just took off from there. And without going more into the New Zealand stuff, I invited in those days you read a magazine, and I read about this guy who was doing a great job on an FZ750 in Australia, and thought maybe I should invite this Australian over to do the 6-hour race with me in New Zealand. And he came out to New Zealand, we got on well, and he invited me back to Australia. And so I sort of gave up my job, sold my car, and went to Australia, and I bought an RZ250 for the production racing over there. And all I had was a toolkit it came with. And, I went and lived with this guy and was going to be a professional racer. Had no idea what I was going to do, but got there with this RZ250, and I was there for about 6 weeks, and, no races on. He wasn't going to the races at the time because I was going to cadge a ride in his van, of course, and nothing was happening. And bought a bike, rode the bike on false plates, because I never registered it. Got pulled up for passing WO lines, got thrown in jail because they thought I'd pinched the motorbike, and had to go to court and all this sort of stuff. It was a bit of a hard time. And then my second race in Australia, to cut this story a bit shorter, my second race in Australia, we went up to a 3-hour race at Lakeside, Lakeside, at Surfers Paradise Raceway in Surfers Paradise. And so it was a 3-hour race, and I was in the support race on my 250. And I got there and raced those races, and I finished second on the day, and I finished second to a guy called Mick Doohan. He was just starting as well, so he won the races, and I finished second to him. And from there, I sort of followed his career a little bit with getting a ride in Japan that he had the year before and things like that. But from that went home pretty with my tail between my legs, like nothing really happened. Nobody noticed that I was great, nothing. So went home and bought a TZR 250, still production bike, of course, because that was what was big in New Zealand. And that bike, I won 21 races out of 22. The bike just suited me, and I was riding an FZ 750 at the time as well. So I was riding lots and lots of classes. And one bike was paid for by me, and the other bike was from the bike shop. And so we were just getting along really well that way because they were going and doing their sidecar stuff. And it was just a dream really to ride these bikes. And then I said at the end of the year, what do I do next year? And my dad said, well, you might as well go back to Australia and give it another go. And instead of living there, why don't you send your bike across and just fly in and fly out and try and get it transported between the meetings? And that worked really well. In my first race meeting, I got noticed by a couple of guys and got to ride their bigger bikes. And I rode the, I don't know if you've heard of the Bob Brown Ducati, but the Bob Brown Ducati is the bike that sort of started Kevin McGee's career off. So the Ducati then was a 600 Panther, and it was bored and stroked out to like 860 or something like that, and very light, small bike. But it made Kevin McGee look really good on a big bike, and it made me look good on a big bike. I should have fucking known back then to stay on the Ducati, shouldn't I?
We'll come to that.
Yeah. But yeah. Once again, the bike, that suited me, and had some really good results on a really small bike in the big class. And that year, what happened then? In that year, Mick Doohan actually, he was racing, and he got a job up in Japan to race for this big, the biggest Yamaha dealer in Tokyo. He was going to get into racing, so Yamaha supported his team, and Mick Doohan was the rider. And then the next year, we want to go this far into this, or
no, it's fine. This takes us to 1988, doesn't it?
Yeah. So this, so then what happens is that Mick.
Peter's done me well with the notes.
Yes. So at that time, Australia was. I don't know why Australia got such good support by the factories, but I think it was because of the Doyle family and Greg Hansford. Greg Hansford back in the day was the Kawasaki rider, and they got very, very good help from Kawasaki. And then sort of the payoff to that was that very good bikes were coming to Kawasaki in Australia, and also Yamaha had a great link as well. So they got factory bikes for some reason, and so then Honda joined them. The only probably one that didn't get any factory bikes was Suzuki in Australia. They had very good bikes down there for their Superbike or F1 championship. And so the path that Mick took was to come back and ride for Yamaha Australia on a factory superbike, but in Australia, which seems weird, a backward step. So I went up there to ride his ride in Japan for the Super Angel Yamaha team, and not knowing to me that they'd spent the year riding as the Yamaha factory were getting the bike shop owner really enthused and involved and running his bikes for them. But my first year up there, the boys in the back of the workshop were going to run the bikes, not the factory team anymore. So I had a couple of mechanics in the back of a small little wee Japanese workshop, and the boss decided that I had ditched the Yamaha of the time, and he'd go for a Bimota. So he bought the Bimota superbike, not knowing anything about it or anybody to run it. And so we'll ride that in the F1 championship, not Superbike, F1 in Japan, where Mick Doohan was riding the F1 championship on an F1 modified bike. So I went up there, and it was just a nightmare, really, but it just opened up more doors. And lucky in a way, I did my only Grand Prix as well while I was there. He went out and bought a TZR 250 for the 250 Grand Prix. So I turned up to the 1988 250 Grand Prix on a standard, I think they were TZRW or something back then, standard bike. Nobody knew how to do jetting. Nobody knew anything. With about 3 laps to go, I was just in the points, and I was going through 130R at Suzuka, and the thing seized and chucked me off the high side and broke a hand. So that was the end of my 250 career, and then so kept flying up and back from there on because I'd actually injured myself. I'd been there for like 3 months, solid, and I escaped, as I called it back then, because I was just so homesick and wasn't having much fun at all. It was a really weird culture back then in the 80s. There was no English at all in Japan, and I used to go along to the workshop every day and sit in the showroom, and I felt like a little puppet. I felt the round eye sitting in the showroom, and the round eye was going to sell more bikes because we had a European associated with the shop, and it was a bit weird back then. But so I went on from there, and then the last race of the year, I fronted up at the Superbike Championship, and we put the Bermuda back to Superbike trim from F1 trim, and I went out and I beat Rob Phillis in one of the races. So Rob Phillis was riding for Kawasaki Australia, and Kawasaki Australia were getting ready to take on the World Championship. So he came up, and they had a very close link with KHI in Japan, and I beat Robbie. And so then Peter Doyle offered me to be his teammate the next year, which seems like a backward step, but back to Australia. But once again, Australia had all the good bikes, and if you could beat Rob Phillis or Malcolm Campbell or Kevin McGee, you knew you were on the pace. So it was a really good proving ground for lots of people. So I went back in '89 and rode the Australian Superbike Championship, and from there it just sort of blossomed, because in 1990 Rob was doing the Australian and the World Championship, flying back and forward, and my career was just taking off. And then I go and I'm riding for the factory Kawasaki in Japan, doing domestic races up there and the Australian Championship. But I throw it down the road coming out of the last corner of Suzuka. And coming out of the last corner of Suzuka, of course, it's the usual thing that we're testing, and it's just like we're just going to try one more thing for the rest of the day, and then
never ever just one more anything.
Never, yeah. And so I go out and I do my one more lap, and I just do my my warm up lap, and I get ready to do a fast lap. I come out of the last corner out of the chicane, and the bike, it's on the F1 bike, and the bike wheelies a little bit. And I put the front wheel down, and the front has no grip, and it just goes away. And as it tucks the front, I'm hanging onto the handlebars, but then get caught between the handlebar and the frame. So then take the back of my hand off, as you can see there, and then we end up taking off a graft.
What?
Yeah. So we take this off, and put it on top of here. So I thought that was going to be the end of my career in 1990, because I lost all my tendons in my hand and my fingers. So I only ever have two tendons now. Those two fingers go together, and those two go together. And this one here was all gone, except we put a new piece of bone in there, and I've never had anything in the end of here. So this is your brake and your throttle, and that's the start of my professional career. I'm just riding really good and going really fast, and I go and do that. So I get back on the plane and go back to New Zealand, and I'm sort of thinking that it's a really bad hole in the back of my hand, but it's sort of, it'll probably just scab over and come right. But little did I know, when I saw the proper burn specialist, that I'd done all this damage to my tendons and things, and I was really, really lucky that I signed a 2-year contract. So I was halfway through my first year, and I'd been riding really well, and I've been up in this is my second year. I'd done 89, and then 90 I did a 2-year contract because they wanted to go to the World Championship. So I've been riding an F3 bike, an F1 bike, and a Super bike for KHI up in Japan, and riding really well. And so the contract carried on over to next year, and weirdly enough, I got the hand moving enough to ride the bike, and then I rode the bike the last race of the year at Eastern Creek, and I really couldn't move my hands enough, and because the tendons had been locking onto the new call it a flap, so they had to cut it all open, and those
grafting themselves onto it.
Yeah, but in those days, I'm going through the National Health System and telling them I need an operation, and they're going, well, you can return to a normal job, you're fine. No, you're not. There's no one going to get you back to being a professional motorcycle racer. What's that? So I'm lucky enough again. The doctor that did my operation was a car racer. So I said to him, we've got to have another. We've got to get this thing freed up. So he got through the National Health System, and he got me back in, and he sliced it open and got the thing moving. He said, from the minute you wake up, I want you just moving your hand and squeezing. And the thing was pretty gory, and there's shit squirting out everywhere and stuff. And the things you do when you don't know any better. And got it going, and testing started for 1991, and Kawasaki had a brand new bike, and the thing was just awesome. Rob took it to the World Championship and did really well on it. And in 1991, I won the Australian Superbike Championship. I won the Pan Pacific Superbike Championship, which was 5 rounds in Asia, won every race, and it was just starting to go really well. And then for 1992, I was, going to the World Championship with Kawasaki, and and in all this time as well, I was developing the X09 250 Kawasaki that Kawasaki made. I don't know if you've ever seen it's called an X09, and it's an upside down V twin. So it was made for Grand Prix. So I'm testing that bike and doing lots with KHR, and we actually raced it at Mine in Japan a couple of times, and I ended up racing it in Daytona as well, because that was my other path to maybe Grand Prix.
Yes,
they would eventually get this 250 going, and that would be another pass if I didn't go to Superbike. And the bike never got enough speed out of it. And the problem we thought at the end was that the only two-stroke guys they had were motocross guys, so the engine design just never had the power that a road bike needed. And the chassis was amazing, but it was only amazing because it was so slow. So once you get the bike going a bit fast, and the chassis would fall behind, and then it was back and forth. Then they abandoned it in the end of middle of '92. But then in 1992, I was signing up for Kawasaki to do the World Championship, but I also I was talking to Lucky Strike, and I was also talking to Yamaha with Marlboro Yamaha, and I actually flew to Europe in between races, and I went to talk with Agostini, because it was going to be, if Agostini gets the Marlboro money, but Agostini never got the money. He was trying to get Kevin Schwantz on a Yamaha with the Marlboro money.
Yes,
and that was in 1990 for the '92 season, and that deal never eventuated. And I was going to be the teammate, hopefully, if the deal eventuated it. So it never did. And then I started to talk with what's Gary's name from Lucky Strike?
Gary Taylor.
Gary Taylor. So talking to Gary Taylor, which is pretty special. So talking with Gary Taylor, and I was trying to get it on the Suzuki with Kevin. This is all done by me. Don't know anybody, and a little bit of help from Peter Clifford. So Peter Clifford was helping me out as well, and so I was trying to get on their 500 as well, and everything was looking rosy. And but then Kawasaki were getting a bit jittery about me signing for them, and so I signed for Kawasaki in the World Superbikes, but as a penalty, they dropped 2 rounds. So I didn't do the whole championship in '92 because I mucked them around. And this day and age, that wouldn't be that wouldn't be called mucked around. In this day and age, you'd be off in good faith and whatever. But they took 2 rounds away from me because I made them hang out for too long.
I've never heard that before in my life.
Yeah,
that's incredible. It's like a punishment.
Yeah, well, and I missed the 2 Italian rounds. There's 2 races in Italy, and I wasn't there. I was at home doing nothing. So, it wasn't. So, things are different back then. Yeah, but with that, I did sign a 2-year contract without those 2 races, and so I didn't have many 2-year contracts, but the 2 times I signed them, that they were my saviours. And my saviour here was that Muzzy was coming to the World Championship and taking over running the team, so he had to take on my contract. So I was very, very lucky, because I don't know who would have been the teammate. Muzzy might have got another American or whatever. But I was very, very lucky that he took over running the team, but left most of the team there. Most of the Australian mechanics were still there. Peter Doyle running the team was still there. So I was very, very lucky to have a 2-year contract that year and carry on with that and go on to be Scott Russell's teammate.
I was going to say, I'll let you you can have a sip of your brew, because that's incredibly well recounted, Aaron. Thank you, mate. It's a fascinating story because it follows a lot of the Antipodean riders in a similar story of as how Mick Doohan did it, how Kevin McGee did it, how Daryl Beattie did it, how Simon Crafard did it. There has to be, because of where you are in New Zealand, you kind of 2 stops from nowhere. There has to be that extra determination to do what you want to do, because it's easy in Europe. We're 2.5 hours from most race circuits, even in the UK. But for where you are, even to go to Oz and to Japan, they're 4 and 5 hour flights, maybe a bit more. The effort that you have to put in to make that career work is kind of beyond what we have to do in Europe. So you have to take every opportunity you can.
Yeah, and like you're saying, even to go to Europe from England, it's just a ferry ride. We can't take even a ferry to Australia, so you can't take your own shit with you. You can't have your own motorbike. You've got to buy one there or whatever, because the boat takes too long to get there. There is no ferry, and then from Australia to where do you go to from there? So it is a lot harder, but maybe that's why I didn't have the dream to be in the World Championship, because I didn't even read magazines about the World Championship, because it was just the time the news got down under, it was old. So, didn't even know about Grand Prix when I was starting, didn't even know, those things. So they probably weren't even dreams, because they didn't even know about it.
Is it that an experience that maybe didn't get you the shot when you were talking to Gary Taylor and to Haga? Would that have a bearing on it, do you think?
For sure. I mean, never had a manager, so never had anybody talking for me. So, having an independent person between 2 people, it makes it a hell of a lot easier. But, then again, I kept the 20%. So, at the end of the ups and downs. So, it was really, really hard, and they treated you like a kid, those guys. They had the checkbook, and they could string you on and whatever. But the meeting, I had a meeting in Perth and a meeting in Adelaide, and so the 5 days between, I flew to Frankfurt to meet with Agostini and flew back with the hope of getting it on a 500. So I was desperate to do something after that. I knew the big wide world was out there. Then the Superbike thing just took off, because that year the Superbikes it wasn't really a world championship until it started in '88, but no one was really taking any notice of it. Wasn't going to go anywhere, and then next thing it's bigger than Ben Hur in the '90s.
It was on the up from when you joined it, and from sort of 92, 93, the halcyon days of the 90s for World Superbikes. 100,000 plus crowds everywhere you went, some of the best racing, some of the great characters. You mentioned Scott Russell there. I mean, tell me about a season with Scott Russell as a teammate.
Yeah, well, that whole season was pretty manic as well. With, I had factory bikes in 1992, and then you get Muzzy coming along and taking over the team. So I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought it just carried on. We get factory bikes, but there's lots of money changing hands and things, and what's going to happen. And I turned up for my first test at Daytona, and I'm on a production bike. I thought, like a thing that was made in America, and it had PVM wheels and PVM brakes, and it was no factory bike. And at Daytona we were testing, and I'd go through the chicane, and I could buckle both wheels, clipping the curbs going through the chicanes, and like this thing ain't going to work in Europe. And so for the whole of '93, I was tuning my bike back to a factory '92 bike by the end of the season. So, Scott was riding the bike he was riding in America, so he was used to that top end horsepower of the Muzzy pipe and Daytona and all that sort of stuff. Where I was probably used to something that was more user friendly. and better for European tracks. So I didn't click with it straight away, and you know, and saying that, Scott and I clicked straight away. We got on really well, and I arrived at Daytona, and he said, "You've got to have a motorhome for Europe." So we went we both bought fifth wheelers, like big caravan fifth wheelers with GMC dualies and stuff. So bought these things over there and sent them to Europe, and I got on really well with Scott's cousin Chris, who drove his motorhome. Excuse me. So we got on really well, and and I was probably, I'm from New Zealand. I'm pretty resourceful, where it was just a crack up to see how bad Scott was with Europe, like how it was just so funny that being that type of American, you just thought it was just going to be a bigger America, and things would be. I can remember fronting up at the toll booths, and you go to Frankfurt in your motorhome, you get to the first toll booth, and Scott will be trying to pay with American dollars, and they say, "Well, we take Deutschmark here. We don't take dollars." Just stuff like that. Just why not? So I think there were big learning curves for Scott to live in Europe, and that was probably his hard bit to start with. And but we got on really well. There was it wasn't that bad. We were completely different people. I think, I like to tick things off and have a list and get it all right and things like that. And my Australian team was still there, and we were still working under that process where, Scott had come from America, and he'd used Dunlops and Dunlop qualifiers, or what you used until the race. You just used qualifiers, and you just did the fastest lap, and then you put the race tyre on. But who was going to test the race tyre? So that would be me. Scott didn't have time to test race tyres. He's too busy doing fast laps. So that sort of stuff happened, and not that, that was just the way we worked, and that was really, really hard. And so the bike didn't suit me for a long time. I just changed onto Dunlops from Michelin, ridden superbikes on Michelin for my whole career, onto Dunlop, onto a bike that was I didn't think was very good, and I was struggling with it. And then by halfway through the year, I was starting to challenge Scott, and I beat him at Monza, and a couple of times. And then from that day on, there was a big talk that I wasn't allowed to beat my teammate anymore. So that's
what
that was quite early on. That's about 6 or 7 races in the championship. So I don't know if there's any coverage of it, but at Donington, for a couple of laps there, I just did big wheelies, and because I was leading Scott in there to let him pass, so I just did a few wheelies and mucked around, and I said, if I'm going to finish second to him, you can at least pay me the first place bonuses. So I got paid a few bonuses that year to finish second and to make Scott look good, and nobody even knew, and so those sort of things, piss you off, but you do what you have to do. And at Monza, when I first beat him in the rain, Muzzy just packed the shit, and it was, why was I doing this, and why? And it's just like, well, all year I've been trying to get into this position with your stupid motorbike, and now I'm in a position. And then I can remember going to the last round was at Sugo, where Scott won he didn't win it the year. He was supposed to win it in Mexico, but we were at Sugo, and in the first race, I think I was about 12th or something like that, and Scott was 15th. Like, we were way back. And KHI gave Scott an engine, and they gave me an exhaust pipe. So in the next race, I think I finished 6th, I think. The exhaust pipe made all that much difference because it was what I was used to, more torquey, whatever. And Scott won the next race, with his new engine package. And even stuff like in Anderstorp, we were fastest at Anderstorp, going really well. But because we were using a titanium valve made in America, not the factory, but by the end of the weekend, the valves had all started tightening up. So the bike wasn't fast anymore. There's lots of drama went on, and it wasn't a great season. So when the opportunity came to jump to Honda, I was I was sort of open for for that, and we were actually in Mexico at the time for the last round of the championship, which got cancelled. So that's when I agreed to sign with the Honda, and I thought that'd be a great way to go.
That's an incredible story. It's amazing what happens in the background and the things that us fans don't get to find out. The fact that you played second fiddle to Scott for the full season and enabling him to win his first, and I think it was his only World Superbike title, wasn't it? But you had that great season. You had the first win in Albacete, and you took your first Suzuka 8-hour win as well. So there were some good highlights in that season as well to really put Aaron Slight on the Superbike map.
Yeah, no, too true. Like my first race in Europe, I won it. Yeah, so I was leading 92. I was leading the World Championship one race, and I was on my face the next. But that was, and in that the year, the weekend before that, I was in Daytona riding the 250, the XO 09 riding that, and the thing was seizing every second session and throwing me on my head and knocking the confidence out of me. And then I got to Europe and won the first Superbike race, and so that. That was pretty special then. But yeah, the 93, I didn't play second fiddle to Scott, as in it just didn't suit me until I finally, we were on par, but I was doing my meticulous way of race tires and stuff, and he wasn't. But once I started to challenge him, that's when, and maybe you can see that, I don't know, maybe because, Muzzy was a bit one-eyed, and that's what he wanted to do. But I don't think he realised my potential, that I was struggling on his motorbike. Where if it had been a KHI bike, I probably would have been, a lot better off. So that 94, just I thought, well, I'm out of here, and I'm off to Honda.
So the story of Honda, it was such a great relationship for you with HRC. And the championship challenges, the race wins you had together, the iconic Castrol Honda colours that you had as well. What are your favourite memories of those years with Honda?
It was actually great to 7 years with KHI. 5 years with KHI, and loved my time there. But I was under the management of this Australian crowd that is all I ever knew. But it was great to have a fresh approach, and to have Neil Tuxworth, who is a very different guy. He's an accountant. He's not in the process of setting the bike up, and that he's managing the team, and which was not interfering with day-to-day stuff, and it sort of gave me some free rein, and I really, really enjoyed that. But the thing that Honda didn't realise is that they'd underestimated the competition. So the RC45 came out, and it was so bad. My first test at Phillip Island, I was a lap record holder at Phillip Island, and the time's like a 38.3 or something. The first test on the bike, we finished. I couldn't break a 40, so I couldn't come within 2 seconds of it. And Doug Poland, the ex-world champion, couldn't come within 3 seconds of it. And we just thought, we're in deep shit here. So they really did underestimate the competition, and they had to go back and really knuckle down. And so things just like, even from my mechanical knowledge, when they we took the heads off, the pistons looked like road pistons. They didn't look too trick at all. So they definitely underestimated, and they had a lot of work to do before the first race. And excuse me, we were way behind the eight ball, and then we got to Donington, and I got 2 second places, and it was just it was amazing. And once again, I was on the Dunlop tyre because that's what Doug wanted. He was the world champion. So I sort of had a bit of a safety net that I was signed as a second rider because they signed the world champion. But from day one, Doug couldn't find his feet on the Honda, and as I look back, it's no wonder, because he came off a Ducati, didn't he? So, so it was hard for him, and for me, it was just a new challenge, and I wanted to get my teeth into it, and and had a great bunch of guys around me, and we did a lot of stuff with that bike. And that year I had 9 second places in my first year. And Honda brought out their 1,000 bikes that they had to, and Ducati brought out their 7 bikes with 20 mirrors, and there was a 916 for Carl Fogarty, a 916, and there's about 5 916s, and that's all they were. But they were at the first round, at the front, and it was really, really hard against that bike. But what?
Are you okay? Go on.
Yeah, so we in 2 months we got the bike. We moved the bike quite a lot along, and even to the, we didn't have a shifter, like short shifter in those days. They used to be mechanical shifters, and they'd cut a cylinder, and so even back then, so we had an electronic shifter that we got right before Donington, and I thought a shifter was not going to make any time difference. But the thing that the shifter allowed me to do was that I could short gear the bike shorter, so keep it in the RPM, but change as I'm coming off the corner. We didn't have to wait till the bike was upright. So I was able to shift the bike in different spots because of the shifter. And that's the thing about Honda. If you knew what you wanted, if you could, because bike setup and that's still pretty black magic, really. What suits me doesn't suit him. But if you could say to somebody, I want a swinging arm with less torsion sideways and more torsion this way, they go and make it.
Incredible.
But so in that 2 months, we got the bike from nowhere to on the podium, which was pretty amazing.
It was an incredible rivalry with Ducati, wasn't it? But both with the manufacturers and the riders. That's what made the World Superbike Championship in the mid-90s. It was the Honda and the Ducati battle every year.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it is that I just don't know why the rules were what they were like. I just when the rules were pretty good in the first, when they were 851s. And they were a lighter bike, and we had a heavier bike, and we were 750. Our bikes were faster in a straight line, so we could catch back the advantage they had from being a V-twin, being able to turn and brake later. And they were pretty similar. But then they went 888, and we're still 750. And then they went 916, and we're still 750. And then it went 955. And then they went 999. And it's just like, it was really weird. And people often say to me, so, it's an Italian-run series with an Italian motorbike, but it's not even that. It's like no one has anything over anybody else. It's just, I don't know. There's no underhanded stuff in it at all, but it's just the way it worked out, and it's just weird that it did work out. Why did the Japanese not jump up and down? Why did, in my book, I think there's a quote in there that's to that day that 80% of the races were won by Ducati, and other 7 manufacturers shared the 20% of wins. It's like, how does that be anywhere near even? Or it was weird that they were getting away with it, but everyone was letting them get away with it. It was just crazy. And stuff like with the Honda, we would have like 6 ratios for every year, and we'd have 3 primary drives for the clutch, and then you got all your final drive, all your sprockets as well. So you could gear the bike to be whatever RPM and it's at the corner that you wanted to get the most power out of it. Ducati they didn't have any gearboxes. They just changed the final drive. They just, they go to the Mazzano and they'd use a 4-speed because they didn't need the other 2 gears. They didn't need first and top because they just used a 4-speed. We'd be using every gear we could get our hands on, and it was easier for them to get their bike in the ballpark, and where we had there was a lot of effort to get there, and we were on the ragged edge doing it. And when you were in the ballpark, you knew that you could keep up, but with 5 laps to go, they were always going to have a better tyre than you had. So that was always in the back of your mind as well. So it was pretty tough, but I had a chance to sign with Ducati, and I chose not to. It was just not the way the contract was approached and came to me. It just didn't. It just was weird, really. As in, we'll agree to terms now, and we'll figure it out next year. And I'm in New Zealand going, well, I need to have a signed contract, need to know what's going on. So I stayed with the dev I knew, and I'm glad I did in the end. Maybe if I had been European and could have been visiting the factory and all that sort of stuff, maybe they might have it might have been a better outcome to go that way. But just never really got there, and it was just I don't know. It's a weird situation. You would think it would be more. You think it is really underhanded what happened with the rules, but it wasn't, and people let them get away with it. So you can't argue with that. Good on them.
What year were you looking to sign for, or what year did the opportunity arrive to sign for Ducati?
That came.
Was that the end of '94?
No, it was after that. Would have been when was it? Ferrari was running the team, so it was with Ferrari I was talking to. So it probably would have been 95 or 96. 95.
Okay.
Yeah, not really sure now. But yeah, Ferrari.
Was that to replace Foggy then?
We probably together.
Oh, because he did 94, 95. Then he went to Honda, didn't he? 96, 97.
96. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that was the other thing with Carl coming to, Carl and I were quite good friends at the start of all this, and even the first year in Europe, I stored my motorhome at his family's. They had a yard for trucks and stuff, and I stored my motorhome there over the winter, and it all seemed quite amicable, really. But yeah, it just got stirred out of context with the media, and Carl would say to me some things like, well, this is the UK media, so I can say what I like. You can say what you like in your media. I'm like, well, no, your media, Sky is covering it for the world. I don't see why you have a monopoly over what gets said. So we had big fallout over that and a lot of things there. And Carl he just never ever gave anything to the bike at all. It was all about Carl and how good he was. It wasn't that the bike was he didn't have to say the bike was better. He just could have said it was a good package. But the bike was not that great. It was just Carl, and it was just Carl's corner speed that made that bike. And it was just that. Well, it really wasn't. There's so many other people who won on Ducatis who never got near the rostrum or anything else. That he could have said something like that. And when he came to Honda in '96, it was great. I think he beat me in we had 13 rounds, 26 races. And in 26 races, I think he beat me in 5. And he did have some wins. But when he won, I was usually second. So he's actually doing the Scott Russell to me, taking points off me. I can imagine if they had told him to finish second to me. And he finished 5th in the championship that year, and I finished second once again. I just thought that was proof in the pudding. And we didn't get more than 2/3 of the way through the year, and Carl had already signed for Ducati. So, he was out of there. He knew that and he was out of there because the RC45 was designed for Aaron Slide. It didn't suit him. I mean, really, it was a production bike that was designed for the road, and I got on with it, people.
There was a lot of people over the years that didn't get on with the RC45.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I look at my photos in corners, I've got a really weird riding style. It's because I'm trying to load the front wheel up with as much weight as I can to get the thing to frickin' turn. You develop this stuff because you want to go fast. It does. If you can't change it, you just got to get on with it, and that's what we did really. And I loved that. But I think that bike was just so amazing for what it was, competing with the competition they had to compete against. The adjustable air stacks on the injection and things like all these things that they made and didn't work and did work, and they were really, really trying hard, and that's why they tried so hard, but nobody ever questioned the rules. They had to try that hard, and then one day in 1998 when I almost won the championship, Honda said, "We're going to try and make a V-twin," and I'm like, well, there you go. So we'll try and make this V-twin. So as far as, I finished in 2000, but we started testing the VTR in 1998. So I was doing double duty in developing a V-twin and trying to win the world championship on the V4. So that was quite an interesting story as well. Is that there was one day at Suzuka where HRC and we sat down at the end of the test. All the other boys were riding the V4 and I was riding the V twin. And the V twin then was just a Firestorm, the Firestorm bike with the So it had a stupid chassis and it just the engine was a stress member and stuff, and it was pretty average. And I think from my calculation, I think the bike was 23k an hour slower down the straight than the RVF, the RC45. But I got a tow from Ito one lap, and I was about I think I was about a half a second a lap slower than him, but I was 23k an hour slower down the straights. I said, well, shit, if we can get some speed out of this thing, we're halfway there. And that's when we realised that the V-twin being nice and narrow, easy to change direction, power delivery really smooth, that we might have half a chance. So, excuse me, at that test, they said, are we going to go on with this project? And so I had to give them my feedback, and that's what we went on with that project. Yeah.
What was life like in the World Superbike paddock in those mid-90s?
It was really good fun actually to start with, because we were all happy to be there. There's a lot of people that were camping out and in caravans, and us from down under here, we had our motorhomes and stuff because we didn't have houses to live in. So we were always in the paddock, so that was really good. And the first years with Robbie Phillis, Robbie was such a laugh, and if he was always doing something, there's always something going on. I can remember at Bruno, he pulled up it was the sewer grate or whatever, and then turned it over and became the barbecue for the evening. Cooked up that's made a hot plate out of this sewer cover and stuff like that. He would just find stuff to do. And I remember in the days at KHI, because we used to camp out at the back of Kawasaki, Germany, in motorhomes and caravans, and we had mini bikes in those days, and I mean, this would never happen now, but we used to race around the forest in these mini bikes, but so that the mechanics could have a go. Their rule was we had to wear thongs and shorts to slow us down, and they could wear any protective gear they wanted to. So imagine going out with your full factory rider in the thongs and shorts and competing against the tree stumps around the forest for a lap time. Yeah, so that was a bit of fun, and it was stuff like that all the time. And but as the money came, that stuff slowed down, and it's not only the money that there was more demands on you. You needed to go to press stuff, and we used to drive our motorhomes everywhere, but you go from Bruno and then suddenly you got an 8-hour test, and you got to go and store your motorhome in Germany, and it's the Dunlop factory or somewhere else, and because I was doing my own driving, and so time became limited as well. So there wasn't that sort of camaraderie going on. But in the early days, the Americans started buying motorhomes, and then we'd so what are we going to do between Mazzano and Ossersleben or whatever. So you'd find a campground next to a lake or whatever, and that would be your base, and you'd just get on and do a bit of training with that as well, and then have a bit of fun with each other. And it was really, really good fun.
You talk about Robbie Phillis. There's a story to be told about a US road trip.
A US road trip.
I think Peter, that Peter had mentioned while you were at Kawasaki, Germany. It's something to do with a road trip that you did.
I don't know about the US. There's plenty of road trips with Robbie Phillis. So I'm not sure about the US, but Rob is the funniest guy. And then when I joined Kawasaki in Australia, that he was, we just had so much fun. We had jet skis together, and I would hang out with his family and things. And I went on to race cars after this, but why I got to race cars is because I learned to drive when I had the renter cars. We used to do so much stupid stuff in these renter cars. I can remember going to Wanneroo in Perth, and we pulled up at the racetrack, and the back bumper and half the back of the car was missing, and we pulled up. We didn't even know, But it was because on the way in we took the sand dune route and took the back off the car, jumping the sand dunes. So it was stuff like that. And the year before that, there was little wee Nissans I used to have, and we used to see how far you could jump them out onto the beach. And one of the guys' cars actually only had reverse and first because it bent that far in the middle that it wasn't slicked any gears. So there was all those sort of things, and in those days you could hand the keys back and walk off. But and so you learned to drive a car through all the rental car days here. And Robbie was at the back of most of those stories. And I remember at Wanneroo that year, he backed out of Kawasaki and he did a rollback, as they called it in Australia. So roll back and reverse and chuck into first, and the thing just went bang. And then it finally selected some gear, and we dropped it off. And when you went off the motorway to go to the airport, when you were turning left, the drive shaft would disengage from the axle, so it had no drive, so it would roll. Then you turn right, it would clunk back into gear. So there's all sorts of stories like that with Robin, and even with his family, towing the motor home, and he had a caravan. It was called a land house because it looked like the shape of a house. But the land house used to do like at 170 on the autobahn, and the people used to see this thing going past, and it was just hell on wheels. But no, so many fun times, with Robin over the years, and lots of different road trips really. Too many.
But again, that's what makes that time so special as well, isn't it? It was the heady days of World Superbikes, but building great friendships and connections with people is you can't do those times without those connections, especially when you have the heat of the World Superbike Championship with Carl and yourself and Frankie Keeley and John Kocinski, real top class riders, all of you. You've got to have some downtime and have some fun.
Yeah, for sure. And the other fun times was who personally probably took it too far was Anthony Gobert. He probably took it to the next level, which I suppose we were fueled by a bit of alcohol. He was fueled by something else. So he probably took it a bit too far. And there's a couple of altercations I had with him trying to put Anthony in his place. Over the years as well. So there was one time at Bruno where he pissed in Kirk McCarthy's helmet, and it was just like, mate, there's no need to be doing that shit. So we had a bit of a roll round on the ground and a bit of but yeah, it was. We all got up and rode the next day, and the thing about motorcycling, over cars, we went to cars, is that you realise you're risking each other's lives. There's when you go into a corner at 250k an hour and you're touching knees, your knee siders are touching, you're not going to run the guy off to the grass. You're not going to, there is a common decency and a common respect that because you're going to end up hurt as well. We're in a car, you give a guy a tap and he's send him off into the wall, doesn't really matter. But yeah, in a motorbike, there's wasn't many people that you would pull up to corner and try and outbrake and think this ain't going to end well. That you all knew that you were going to get away with it or not be able to do it. Yeah.
What about when you pull up to a corner and you stand the bike up and you have handbags at 10 paces with with one of the gentlemen whose hometown is 5 minutes down the road from me and was on the show about a month ago, the good Lord Neil Hodgson?
That was so funny to look back on now. I mean, there's probably a bit of a miscommunication, but I thought it was quite clear. So that was 1998, and I'm not sure how Neil recalls the story, but how I recall the story is that it was 1998, and the championship was Corser had crashed the day before, so he had a ruptured spleen, so his day was done, and the championship was between me and Carl. And we were probably going into that weekend thinking it was going to be all Troy. And the Honda at Sugo never went really that well there on the Michelins around there. The Japanese guys were all on Dunlops, so they would always take good points off the guys that were in the championship. So the wild cards would take good points off them. Typical there, didn't qualify that well, and Neil was on the Dunlops in front of us, and I went up to her and said, so the championship's between me and Carl, so if I poke my nose and give me some room, is how I recall it. Give me some room, and for fucking 15 laps, he chopped my guts out. Every time I tried to pass him, I wouldn't put the big doolally up the inside and take him out. I was just trying to keep my tyres good, and every time I put it up the side, he'd carve me up. And so I finally got past. By the time I got past, the rear tyre of the Michelin was buggered. Carl was gone, and that was the championship done for me. So I came out of turn 2 at Sugo, and I just parked the bike against the Armco and walked onto the track, and Neil come past, and I thought, you've stopped. You're sitting on a motorbike, and I'm not. So I grabbed him by the chin piece and just pulled him off the bike. And he said, what the fuck? And so it was all on. So I'm not sure if he heard what I said on the start line, but I thought I made it pretty clear that, don't give us any jip. It's going to be... And I think maybe he just took that out of context, that I thought that I could beat him, and he was not letting that happen. And as he says in all his interviews, he was fighting for a job as well. He didn't know what he was doing next year. But yeah, to me, it was pretty clear that the championship was between me and Carl, and give me some room, and it didn't happen. So I was pretty irate, and I think I don't think it's the best television for a long time myself, actually.
I think from Neil's point of view, I think there was a slight kind of misunderstanding of the situation, because, as you say, he was in the middle of fighting for his job. He was on the Kawasaki. He came back to British Championship the following year, and I think everybody was kind of fighting for their life at that point. And in the heat of battle, he just, if he could keep you behind him, not realizing what was said at the start. And Mark Lloyd recites the story as well, because Pup was one of your mechanics for a few years. Pup was on the show of just before Christmas, and he talks fondly of his times with you at Castrol Honda and HRC. And he said the same. It's like, the question was asked, but the actual delivery of it from Neil, it didn't quite, it wasn't quite there. And I think if he had the chance, it would be a different outcome. But as I say, he says how young he was at the time, and there are things that he would do differently. Would he have the chance again? Especially at that time in his career, when it was maybe too much too soon. And then he had to come back to the UK. Then he matured nicely, and then went back to World Superbike, and as we know, became World Superbike champion in 2003.
And all I could see was he's one of fucking Foggy's mates. In the heat of the battle, was like, for fuck's sake, just give me some room. And yeah, I just saw red, and when you couldn't get away with that stuff these days. And another story there, like in 1997 when Kocinski was my teammate. I didn't go on the podium that time. So I did a couple of things that you probably wouldn't get away with today, and I didn't go on the podium at Sentul, because at Sentul the first race, I won the first race, I think it was, or was it the second? And anyway, it was only Sentul and Phillip Island to go, and John was going to win the championship, and if it worked out, we could have a 1-2. So that was what, without saying, like in the Muzzy days, I'll pay you the bonus for finishing. If it worked out, we could be 1-2. And so I'm on Kocinski the whole way, on and the whole way, on and the whole way. And so I think, the last lap to go, well, I'll just pull out and pass John, because that's, I'm keeping up. So that's as good as, I'm going to win this race. And I passed him. And then with 2 quarters to go, he just chops me up, which the race before or the race after, he puts Simon Crafer off the track. The same corner, same move. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, didn't we have a talk before we went into this race? So I just wouldn't even go on the podium, and just I was just disgusted in the whole thing. And that was John. He was just a weird character, that guy. He was very weird. Yeah, could not make him out. And I don't know what he had over HRC. They seem to bow and scrape to anything that John did. And I don't know what he had over them, but with the Honda, because we were behind the 8 ball with the Ducati, we were always trying to get it better. So we would have a team meeting after every session, and what did you do? What did we do? What can we do better? Da da da. John came to the team and said, "Not doing that. That's not the way I work." And it's like, well, we've been doing it here for 4 years so far. Why can't you? And he just got away with it. Never did it. So yeah, that was a weird one with on John Boy. So for me, not getting away from the Neil story, because I love that story. It was such good TV. But for the Honda days, I had it was really, really, when I look back, it was really, really weird. Like, in the first year I had a world champion as my teammate. Then the next year, Doug was signed to be my teammate, pulls out after 3 rounds. I'm still there, still doing the business. The next year, they signed Carl. Sorry, not Carl. No, 95. So, 95, Simon fills in. So
Simon Crafar filled the end of the year, didn't he?
Yeah, so he gets a full factory bike that was Doug's bike with roomy colours on it, but works out of our truck. So he's there. So I've beaten both those guys. Then they get Fogarty on, and I beat Fogarty, and then they get Kocinski on. He wins the world championship because it rains all year. But every year it felt like they were just challenging me with another person, and I didn't feel like I was. I don't know. They were trusting me with their package. And then 98, I think I had a breakthrough in 98, just thinking that I knew that I was fast enough. I've done my time. I don't need to be thinking about it anymore. I need to do my own shit. We actually had a change of crew chief within the team as well. I thought it was just about time that it had a refresh, and just to make it more fun. And I had the best year ever, which was 98, and that was when we had the fallout with Neil. Yeah.
What happened there?
Sorry, I'm talking about Neil Hodgson.
Oh, with Neil Hodgson. I thought you meant with Tux.
No, never really had a. He had a soft spot for Kocinski too. I just don't know why. I mean, why would Neil go to the airport and pick up John Kocinski? I don't know. I mean, why would he run around after him? It was weird. Yeah, so that was, and he still said today. I was in England when Neil retired, and he still said the person that he rates highest is John Kocinski. Thanks, Neil. I'll travel all the way to England for that.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'll travel halfway around the world to get to come and do your retirement, Dave. And I remember Pup told the story that because Pup was working with John Kocinski in his championship year, wasn't he? And he clearly recalls that when Kocinski won the championship, he left the garage and he didn't see him again for 27 years. He literally just walked away and that's it. Yeah. He didn't see him again till Corser a couple of years ago. And then he said he walked back in and it was like they'd never been away.
Yeah, just a weirdo. And like, why has he come back? It just feels like, I don't know. Yeah, like it seems to be people come back to the sport when they need something from it. Is there nothing else happening in his life? I think, is that what it is? Or I don't know. Like a weird character. I remember a story at Hockenheim where he had a Dutch motorhome driver and he pulled up and he parked next to me. And I said to him at the end of the weekend, can you never, ever park next to me? Like it just does my head in. That the antics that John does to go into his motorhome or do something in his motorhome just has me peering out the window to see what stupid shit he's going to do next. It was just so distracting. It was just crazy. Like, just like a small story with John going to his motorhome. When John came to the team, we had to buy extra gas bottles. The big gas bottles you blow up your tires with or whatever. We have 3 bottles of those, but you have 4 bottles when John's in the team because after every session he's got to air all his leathers out and all to get rid of all his greabies or whatever. But and then to go to his motorhome, he goes to his motorhome and he walks up his steps, like step, and he opens a 4-finger and thumb because I'm watching. Opens the motorhome door to go in, and then he shuts the motorhome door, and then he comes back out, and he's got a pair of jeans in his hands, and he goes round the back of his motorhome, takes his shorts off at the back of his motorhome, and puts his jeans on, and then he's whack, whack, whack with his earring his shorts out, and he goes up his steps, and he gets his thumb and forefinger again on the door, open to put those, like, the guy, did have, OCD badly. He needed help, and it was bizarre. Yeah, and it was just too distracting for me to be parked next to him.
I've got shit to be getting on with. I can't be sat here watching you all day.
Yeah, exactly.
When you look back and the chances that you had and the world championships that you fought for, how much over the years was a hindrance on your right hand? Because that's a serious injury to come back from, and not having full range of movement and full control over the outside two fingers. How much of that was a feature of your championship years?
I think it actually, in the end, it wasn't too bad at all. We developed the D lever for a road bike. Like motocross bikes used to have those little D levers on it in those days, and then so we made a short lever, so I was only grabbing it with two fingers. Because before then, I was all four finger braking. So, but the brakes were coming on and stuff, and it wasn't that bad, I don't think. I probably more had a hindrance with my left hand. I broke my wrist early on my career, and so not having to move your hand too much, you were gripped onto the handlebar. That some years I suffered tendonitis because I didn't let go and feel the thing. But this hand is it's actually pretty good. And when I went into the last surgery, I actually took in a handlebar and said to the doctor, "Can you make that little finger fit around the handlebar?" So it was always bent like that. So you can see it's bent.
So it is, it's handlebar shaped.
Yeah,
that's incredible. But the things you do as a motorcycle racer.
Yeah. So, and he was like, "Oh well, I usually make it a bit bent so you don't get it caught on shit anyway." So okay, so because that from there to there, that's a new piece of bone. So it's one piece of bone, and he shaped it so I can grab hold of the handlebar. But there's so much physio I did in this hand. This hand's still strong to this day, and it actually. It wasn't too bad, but the 3 8-hour race, or all the 8 hours I did, after an 8-hour race, these two fingernails would drop off. They would turn blue from pulling the brake on so hard for so long, so many times a day, that they would turn blue and the fingernails drop off. So I don't know if I was overdoing that or what was going on there, but yeah. Yeah, but no, it wasn't too bad, I don't think, yeah.
How much did you enjoy Suzuka? You got a hat-trick of wins, 93, 94, and 95 with Scott, with Doug Poland and Taddy Okada in 95. How much did you enjoy riding for HRC at Suzuka and winning the 8-hour?
Not much. It is so hard. It's just so hard. I mean, it's 36 degrees and it's 90% humidity, and you're riding a bike that's 110 Celsius. Like it is just so hard. The suffering you go through is just incredible. And I mean, you only enjoy it once you cross the finish line. that amazing feeling of getting there. But the other times when you don't, you could finish anywhere. It wouldn't really matter. It's just such hard work. And in '94, Taddy actually put the bike on pole, and I crashed it. So. It could have been 4 in a row. It could have, but it's just so hard that it's not enjoyable at all, really. And the flying back and forward from Europe to do the testing between, and the other thing that people don't, the ADR was so important back then. Like in our HRC contracts and even Mick Doohan's contract, the first schedule of events you're signing to is the ADR, and then it's the World Championship. So that's the first schedule. Excuse me, yeah. So you're signing that first. So that's how important it is to them. So, there was a lot of testing and a lot of stuff. And our bikes, our factory Superbikes, we'd test them at Phillip Island, and for the first 2 rounds, the bikes were really good and getting better, and then development just stopped. Now development's for 8 hour. So there's about 3 rounds where nothing would happen. 4 rounds, nothing happened. The 8 hour would finish, then the development would start going again. It was just so big to them. So yeah, it was really, really hard. And those days too, I think it was the second year I won, we started mucking around with intravenous drips and things like that. So we were trying to get our fluids up that way with ice baths and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so it was, it's pretty ugly, really. It's now that they reckon that, if someone's beating me, they've done it 4 or 5 years in a row, but they have 3 riders now. So, I don't even count that. Getting off the bike after an hour and having to get straight back on another hour, it's murder. It's just so hard.
How different were the bikes from your World Superbike RC45? Because a lot of the 8-hour bikes, the Hark Pro, the factory bikes, they were full factory, 8 sugars, unobtainium, everything you could throw at it to make those bikes what they were. Were they massively different to your World Superbike machines?
No, they weren't really. And probably the thing there is that there was only really the 4 factory Castrol Honda bikes and the factory Japanese championship bikes, and the US had factory bikes. There wasn't really many factory bikes around, so the Honda Britain bikes didn't look that special because they weren't, didn't have a factory chassis, didn't have the whole thing. So they were pretty similar to our bikes. But the thing was, they were really slow because you have to make 1 hour. If you don't make an hour, you have an extra pit stop. So they were just so lean that they felt like a slug. They were really, really slow. And that was the really hard thing to get used to, is just give it some fuel so we can get going. And they just never would. They had a plan they stuck to. Even the testing 3 months before, I just want to do a lap time. No, this is what we got to run to, and this is what you got to do. Even for qualifying, they wouldn't turn up the fuel. And I think that might have been one of our advantages with the Honda, because they were the first fuel injectors bike. So they sort of knew it was nighttime. They knew that the air was getting thicker or thinner. Where a carbureted bike, you were on that main jet and that was it. So our bike probably got better as it got dark, where the rest of them probably didn't. And that was, probably the only thing. But that year I beat, Scott and won it by 0.32 of a second. That was just amazing because Scott and I won the championship, won the race the year before, and we were fighting all day long. So his teammate was Terry Reimer, and mine was Doug Poland. And Scott and I were sort of about the same time, and our 2 teammates were just a little bit slower, but they were a little bit slower. So we pitted Doug early. Instead of doing the hour, we came in at 35 minutes or 40 minutes because there'd been a stoppage that day. So we sort of surprised them and came in early to try and get me to do 3 or 4 laps more than Scott had done, so we could get some time back or whatever. But as we did it, they jumped on board and did it about 2 laps later. And I can remember going in the front straight, and I just, as Scott was coming out of the pit, I just gave him the bird as I went past. And we had like 40 minutes to run. And I don't know if Scott's ever done that faster outlap in my life. He was on cold tyres. I was already out there. I thought I'd put 2 or 3 seconds on him. We came down the back straight, and he's trying to outbrake me into the chicane. I thought, that is the worst thing I've ever done, was give him the bird. So for 40 minutes, we were just back and forward, well, actually, for a long time. And then when it got dark, I'm not sure that Scott's eyes were that good, because he only actually passed me once in the dark, and then he followed me for the rest of it. So, yeah.
Needs a bit of a target to follow on. One thing that Pete Donaldson did tell me that you do have away locked up in a dark vault somewhere, that you have a boxed and unwrapped RC45.
Yeah. So there was 13 of them left in Japan, and they sent them to the UK. 13 of them, and I think there was 4 shops got 3 each, and there was the 13th one. So I bought the 13th one. So so I bought I don't know when it was. It was probably. Yeah, it would have been before the SP came out for sure. But so it's just been sitting in a box in my shed, and everybody's why don't you get it out? Why don't you do this? And it's just I don't know. It's just a really nice keepsake that's sitting there. that I don't know who's going to enjoy it. It's not going to be me. It's not, I don't know, but it's just something I just had to have. And, to ride an RC45 on the road as a standard bike, it's not going to be much fun. It's more iconic that it's just there. And yeah, I put so much heart and soul into that bike. And, although this is a production bike, I would much rather had a factory superbike sitting in the shed for sure. But Mick Doohan put a stop to that. He got too many of them when he was winning the 500 championships, and they gave up giving those out. And so this is the next best thing that I could get. Yeah, so have that just sitting there, which is just sits in a box.
I think it's a great thing to have, and to see the leathers and the helmets behind. And one of the great things of doing what we do, we get to see a lot of history from the riders, and it's so good that the memories are there, and the way. And we'll come on to the brain bleed shortly, but having the history around, and you see a set of leathers, and then a story comes up, and you think, oh, I remember that time, and that's when we did that, and it's everything that shaped you to who you are now, hanging up behind you.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, looking in there, hanging out behind me, that's the 3 8-hour leathers that I won. The 3 8 hours was, and then I went on to do some car racing. That's the last. So I start at the other end of the room with my very first set. So my very first set's still hanging there, and I've just sort of taken one from every year, and I got to the part of my career where I just said, from now on, I'm going to keep all my memorabilia. I'm not giving any more away. Got to have some myself, because for a lot of time people want them for auction prizes or whatever, and so I've got about 30 sets just here, which is just the years. And even the other day, the TZR 250 I was talking about that I won 22 races on, or 21 races on, that came back to me as a guy dropped it at a shop and said, "This is Aaron Sight's first race bike, and we've used it and abused it. It's really, really rough, and we don't know what to do with it. Can you give it to him when you see him?" So
how fabulous!
So I've got this TZR 250. It's in bad shape, but it's still my TZR 250. So I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to tidy it up, because it would just be a standard production bike that will look like everything else. It's just the story it came back, and which is pretty cool.
Fabulous story. I remember when I spoke to Pop about his time with you, and he recalls a time, and I think it was Eastern Creek on a test, where the guys first noticed, I think you first noticed, that there's something not quite right. It'd been a strange year, but then they came to the test when you realized that maybe things weren't quite as they should be, in a health point of view.
And when you say it had been a strange year, I mean, it did start way back, like 98. I thought I was world champion. I won more races than anybody else, more fastest laps, and I was on top of my game. And I came home, did the same training, did the same things, and then I just 2 weeks after New Year, I just felt shit. And so I started seeing doctors and stuff, and I had blood tests, and I kept seeing all these doctors and things, and just got no answers. And I started 99 off, and there's been a photo circulating around some social media stuff with me asleep in a wheel crate. So the wheels are on the arm, I'm asleep, and it's at the tests at Phillip Island, and I'm just really, really weary the whole time through 1999, and I just don't have a good year, and things aren't going my way. I get knocked off by Colin at Donington, break my finger, and it's just a really hard year, and I'm feeling like shit, and see more doctors. And then we go to Phillip Island to do the test, and this is my VTR1000 SP, the thing that I developed, the thing that we're going to take us to the World Championship. And I get there, and I'm just feeling so bad, not really on the pace. And we leave there, and Colin's a bit faster than me, and we go down to the beach with a couple of the boys, and I went for a swim. And I can remember coming out of the tide and just looking back at the sun, and the pain in my eyes is just so severe. And I get up next morning, catch a flight to Sydney, and I wake up in my at Eastern Creek, and I wake up and honestly, I wake up and I've got no sight. It's just black, and I'm like, shit, something's going wrong here. And suddenly my vision comes back, but it's really, really sort of bit double vision, and like I'm going, what the? The doctors are telling me I'm fine. What can be going on? So I better go out to the track. So I go out to Eastern Creek, and I'm feeling like shit. My vision's really weird. And I get on the bike, and like, when we test, within 3 laps, you're within a second of your lap time or whatever. I think I was like 8 or 10 seconds off, like just unheard of. And in Eastern Creek, you turn 1, turn 2, and you come back over turn 3 into turn 4, and it goes over a hill, and it's quite bumpy as you turn in. And I can remember my brain and my eyesight wasn't quick enough. My brain wasn't quick enough to take out the bumps, so that I had blurry vision because it couldn't keep up with the bumps. And I'm going, this, I don't know if I got some virus or whatever. So I just came in and I said to the guys, I really don't know what to tell you, but I just cannot ride the motorbike, and I just don't know what's going on. And they were just looking at me like, you're fucking crazy. What's going on? What's wrong with you? And so I got on the phone. I rang a doctor that I was seeing in New Zealand. I keep seeing this doctor here, and they've been telling me I'm fine, and maybe I'm, overtraining and I'm over this or overdoing that, or maybe cut this out, cut that out. And then she said, well, I've got a friend who's at the Royal North Shore in Sydney. Go and see her. I'll send all your medical files to her, and we'll go from there. So I remember driving there, and I was in my rental car, and my vision is getting worse and worse. And my double vision is like so far out that I've got to close one eye to keep the car from running over the cat's eyes. So my vision's so poor. And I get to there, and she pulls out the medical records, and I see a handwritten note, and at the top it said, "The only thing I haven't done is imagery of his head." So I'm sitting there, and she says, "Well, we're going to do an MRI." And I don't know if they would have found anything back then, because what I think was happening is that the pressure, the vein had malformated, so the vein had bled out. So the vein was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it bled out. So I think when it was getting bigger, it was putting pressure on the brain. That was what was giving my tiredness, and it was in the brain stem. So that's where your optic nerve is. So that's what gave me the double vision. Once it bled out, it gave me double vision. But the whole year, I'd been feeling shit because I had this pressure on the brain. So then I went and got an MRI, and we had a 2 centimeter bleed back then in the brainstem, and I was just like ecstatic. I was just like, for fuck's sake, they've found something. I was over the moon. I could not believe. I thought I was about to slip my wrist in '99. I just couldn't believe how bad things were, and I was just like, thank God they've found something. Not knowing that I'd have to have brain surgery, and I didn't actually care what I was having. I had an excuse. If you'd say to the boys, it wasn't that I was so fucking stupid. I had something to blame it on.
Yeah.
And so that was great. And then suddenly it's February, and I should be in the World Superbikes. And now what do I do? So luckily enough, they put me with a doctor, Professor Morgan. He was actually in California at the time, lecturing on the subject of malformated veins. So they said, he's on a plane coming back tonight. You go home, and we'll see you in the morning. As I was heading home, they rang me and said, "Oh no, we've just re-looked at the MRIs. You don't need to be staying by yourself. You need to be back in the hospital." So this stage, Robbie Phillis had picked me up because he was living in Sydney at the time, because I couldn't drive by now. So he picked me up and returned me to the hospital. And then Professor Morgan came in and saw me and said, "Yep, too easy. What we do is going to go in here, we're going to clip the vein off, and we're going to do this, do that, and you'll be done." And I'm like, "Yep, whatever, just do it, knock it out." And yeah, so he went in, brain surgery, in there for 4 hours, and then in ICU for about 2 days. And the thing with the brain is that what people don't realise is that you break your arm, you put it in a sling, and you rest it. but there's no way to rest your brain. Your brain's got to think all day long, all night long. It's got to think to do everything. So it's just so tiring. You're like, I can remember being kicked out of the hospital and saying, well, you should go somewhere else and stay near the hospital, and, have a slow recovery, whatever. And I can remember my wife, Megan, saying, let's just go up and have a cup of coffee at the shop, the cafe at the top of the hill. And I can remember being in the cafe and the stimulant of noises, of the traffic, of the coffee machine. I was there for like 2 minutes. Said, I've got to be in a quiet place. I just got to get out of here. And so then you're sitting on you're sitting by the pool in your chair and you're reading a book, and a day goes by and you can't stand noises, and you go, I wonder what he fucking did in there. Am I the same person, or I'm sitting there going, am I going to get out of this? Is this semi state that I'm in? Is it going to be normal?
Is this the future?
Is this, yeah. And then I suddenly thought, about a week later, I thought, well, if I'm thinking that, maybe I'm okay. If I wasn't thinking that, maybe I'm in trouble. And that all I knew was racing. So it was really easy for me to want to get back. And I can remember that the doctor said to me that when they open up your skull, they take away your driver's license for 12 months, no questions asked. And I said to him, so how about going back to racing? And he said, well, you should be not too bad. We'll see. I'll give you a clearance for 3 months. This is when I came back and visited him about 6 weeks later. 4 weeks later. And I think when I went home and I got home, I rang him back and I said, can you make it 12 weeks? He says, well, 3 months is 12 weeks. And I said, well, no, 12 weeks is Thursday of Donington and 3 months is Monday after Donington. So
beautifully done.
Can you make it 12 weeks? And he said, oh, yeah, 12 weeks. Yep. So 12 weeks. And like, once again, not having a manager or anything like that, I'm dealing with the FIA and FIM about trying to get my license back and and what we ended up doing was what was the guy, the doctor, F1 doctor, the F1 doctor that helped. What was the guy that had a Frenzen had a
Heinz Harold Frentzen.
Yeah, so he had a head injury and I forget the doctor's name, but he was the FIA doctor, and they said, well, if you can get approval from the FIA doctor, who's got a place in Stanley Street in London, and you can then we'll let you out on the track on Thursday at Donington, and it will observe you. So in this, I'm now trying to get back to Europe, and I'm trying to train. I'm still, groggy and whatever, and I've got to get to London, and I've got to pick up a motorhome, and I've got to get to here. And I managed all that, and we got to race at Donington. And, I can remember coming out, the doctor was observing me, and I can remember coming out and doing a lap, because no one else is on the track. It's Thursday, and I come over the start line and I do this wheelie the length of the front straight. And the boy says, what did you do that for? I said, because I could. It was just amazing, and every weekend I just got better and better and better, but I just needed that. The fatigue was just huge. And, I'm still driving my motorhome all around Europe and still doing all the stuff, but having naps every 4 hours. And, no one's driving for me or helping me out in any of those things. But, it was quite amazing that. Good night. It was quite amazing that we could get through to that. But when I look back at it, I had some fairly good results, but there was always that maybe at one bike length. Excuse me again. It was probably because my reaction time wasn't quite there. So I'd leave a bike length. And because I left that bike length, the next straight they had a bike length. Now I could never really mix it. I could do the lap time, but not really mix it. And it wasn't until the very end of the year that I thought I was starting to, hit my straps again. And that's when, I was thinking everything was cool, and I'd sign with Honda again and we'd be away. And that's where I felt a bit let down by the team, that they didn't let me know they didn't want me until the last race. And at Brands Hatch, the last race meeting, there is no rides left. They're all gone. So I felt a bit hung out to dry. And that race meeting, I put on a new set of leathers and then threw the crowd at the end of the meeting. And but it was quite funny that the kid that got the leathers, his name's Aaron, little boy that got the leathers. It's quite weird how things work out. So that was very, very sad for me. It was just so sad the way it ended. I tried so hard to get back to, get back to the top, and I've had fucking brain surgery, and I get.
What do you want me to do? What do you?
Yeah,
I'm doing my best.
Yeah, and Simon Crafer filled in for me that year. And my results were better than his straight away, and stuff like that. So I felt a bit hard done by, but as I said at the start of our talk, that, how do you finish? I don't know how you finish, and looking back, it wasn't so bad.
It's amazing how when our time passes and you get to look back and you go, do you know what? It was actually all right. But at the time, it's not all right.
And I keep saying to people, people say to me, "Oh, aren't you disappointed you missed out on the World Championship and you're not world champion?" I said, "Well, really, does it make any difference to me as a person?" And I'm a kid from Masterton of 20,000 people, and I lived in Monaco for 7 years. I did the World Championship. I did everything I could possibly dream of, and I didn't even have those dreams. Those dreams, So I'm content. And it was just an amazing trip, and I'm just so grateful for it, and so many things just needed to align for me to get to where I got to, and because I finished 4.5 points off the championship in '98, because fucking Neil Hodgson because there was those little points, but in that year there was so many things go wrong. Like in 1998, the first race meeting, I was lapping the French rider on the Yamaha, and he drove me out to the grass as I was trying to beat Haga, and I crashed the bike. But I picked the bike up and finished fourth, and then I went to we went to Nürburgring, and I crashed coming out of the last chicane. I picked the bike up then and finished fourth again. So there was so many 4.5 points in all those years. At Laguna Seca, I got taken out at the start line. There was like a bomb went off, and I was taken out at the start line there. There was just every race menu I could name. There was just, and when it went right, it went so right. My first double victory at Misano, and then my very next weekend, double victory at A1 Ring, straight away. And I can remember being just so on top, like at Misano, our bike in 1998. I can remember saying to myself, well, I'm going to go and I'll follow Troy, and like knowing where everybody was. And when Carl gets within a second of me, I'll pass Troy and I'll go to the front. And I can remember going past the pit board. They put out 0.9, past Troy, put a gap on him. And I remember thinking, he's going to think what happens all the time is that I'm going to wear my tyre out. I'm going to come back to him. But this weekend, it's not going to happen. And so I managed to win that. And then to the second race, thinking, well, he knows my plan now. I can't do that. But I actually managed to win the second race as well. It was just, I was on top of my game. Nothing was going to get in the road, So it's just so amazing in so many ways, and and so hard in others.
I think it's an absolutely fascinating story. I know time's getting on down in your neck of the woods at this point. I mean, this, and I'm sure our viewers and the ladies and gentlemen listening have found this absolutely as fascinating as I have. And Aaron, thank you so much. It's a huge pleasure to sit and do this. We've got a couple of questions from our patrons who contribute to the show every month. They get early access to the show, and they get to ask questions of the guests as well before we sit down. So if you'll oblige me, we've got a couple of questions to finish off with. The first one is from Simon Breeze. What was the single best and worst attribute of the RC45? And as I'm looking at the screen behind, and what was your favorite race bike?
The best attribute. the bike was just such a lovely bike. I mean, the worst attribute is it didn't seem to want to turn. It didn't want to steer. I just wanted to run wide everywhere. And so, that's what the riding style I developed was over the bars, lots of weight on the front. We run it pretty steep so that it would try and turn. So probably it was his worst thing. Its best thing was just from 95 on, it was just so bulletproof. It was such a reliable machine, and it was awesome. Just adding to the story there, in 1994 and at Hockenheim, the second race, I just saw it came up on some social media the other day where I crashed at turn one. To this day, I don't think anybody knows that it dropped a rod. So this you sort of have to take that on the chin when you're developing a bike. Crashed at turn one. Why would you do that? Well, it actually dropped the rod. But in true Honda fashion, they went back and they looked at all the rods, and that was a different batch. So we're not using that batch anymore, and it never happened again. So, amazing what they did. But back then it was heartbreaking to me to have to say that I crashed at turn one. There would have been 10 second places. And the best race bike, growing up, I loved the FZ750. Was the old FZ750 with a 16-inch front wheel. I couldn't do anything wrong on that bike, and as growing up, people noticed me on that bike. But then, that's the early time. But the RC45 it was so amazing what they did with it. To try and get the speed out of it. It was just a work of art. There wasn't anything standard on it. Every nut and bolt, you couldn't see it. You couldn't see a production bike in it. It was such a cool thing.
And some of your DNA as well, getting it put together and to make it work. When you talk about the riding style as well, some of the images I've seen over the years, and especially as the iconic pictures of kind of Lukey Heights and at Phillip Island, very similar style to Mick doing in loading the front and getting the weight forward. In the silhouette is very similar to Mick's in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but then he went through that patch with his bad legs and sort of started poking his shoulder down at the ground and stuff like that. And he got a bit weird because of his feet and his legs. But I think we did weight the bikes probably similar. I always rode with really bent elbows. I never actually touched the back of the seat because I was always trying to wrestle the thing. And so I don't know if it's an Australian thing or whatever, but yeah.
It could be. Thank you for that one, Simon. For Craig Lowe, it's always a big question, and I think I know the answer compared to what you just said earlier on. Do you have any regrets over your career?
Yeah, like I say, I don't really. I look back at the Ducati, signing for Ducati, and but I didn't feel comfortable at the time. I didn't feel like I should be doing a deal that was done over the phone, and I didn't take that deal because it didn't feel right. So, I'm not worried about not being there. I tried to get on a 500, so I didn't try that hard. That I didn't have a superbike ride. I tried hard enough and put that to bed. And so, I'm pretty happy with all my decisions, and I think at the end of the day when you're making those decisions with your heart if it feels right. Otherwise, you would have gone another way. And to not win the World Championship. It makes no difference when I'm 59.
It's so true, and it's a refreshing attitude to have as well, because you can take that with you for such a long time. Finishing racing when you did, and then to have 25, 35, 45 years thinking, what if? But you have it's a long time to look back, and you can become wrapped up in it and becomes bitter. And when you talk to the fans and having this great chat that's been so full of positivity, you often can come across chats, whether it's on my channel, somebody else's channel, whether it's a live chat show, there's a hint of bitterness that comes through. And I find that really sad for whoever it comes from, because you have to live your life with that every day.
Imagine still being in the paddock today, in a job in the paddock because you think you have to be there. And you can't be at home with your family and you're still in a championship because you think you have to be there because you're trying to prove something, or because you feel welcomed by the paddock that you need to be there. That would be horrible.
Yeah, like there's something missing that you're trying to fill a gap that isn't there. You've
Yep.
got to be there because you want to be, not because you have to be.
Yeah, that would be horrible.
I can't imagine having to be in that situation. There's a couple more questions, but I think we've kind of covered them because I don't look at the questions prior to our chat. I like them as a surprise to me as well. But sometimes we go through in the course of the conversation where we've actually covered the question. So from Chris Turner, did you ever consider or have the chance to sign for Ducati, which we covered earlier? Or did you want to win the title and on the Honda to prove you were the better rider? So I think we've covered those off quite well. Yeah,
but I did I did hang on to being a racer for a little bit longer after not re-signing in 2001. I went to America like clinging on to try and keep a ride, and I was going to sign with Parts Unlimited. They were called. It was a Ducati team. Yeah, I did ride the Ducati at Daytona. And just thought this it was a production bike really, and it just at the same race meeting, Scott Russell was riding a Ducati as well, and he got cleaned up on the start and compound fractures of the leg, and I just thought, you know what, I don't need this, I'm out, and I did Daytona, and just thought that's me done. And to get on a Ducati now, and it's not a good one, and to race in the dangerous tracks in America, after what I've been used to, I'm not doing myself any justice, and I'm on a hiding to nowhere. See you later. So signed out.
That is the perfect way to end it because it's on your terms.
Yeah. And suddenly realised, and I don't know how, but if I had been at another signing, they might have given you hope. So yeah, this was the end. Yep.
The stars align at certain points, don't they? They align for the good stuff and for the not so good stuff. But when you look back, it's of its time, and you go, do you know what? I've had a good crack at this. I've had a good time. I've got a good life, and this is time to see what's next.
Yeah, no, for sure. And coming back to New Zealand, and it's so small, and it's so behind in so many ways. It's just, that's hard in itself, but it's beautiful too, and it's in its own way as well. I mean, it hasn't got the distractions of everything else, and things aren't easy here. It's a bit like the old ways, it is hard for people in New Zealand and to do their sport and all that sort of stuff, and maybe that's why they punch above their weight when they get to somewhere where they can, because they've done it all themselves, and it's pretty tricky getting there.
It's an incredible story. Aaron, thank you so much. That's been 2 hours of just fantastic listening. A pleasure for me and a privilege. And I can't thank you enough. And a massive thanks to Pete Donaldson as well for putting us in touch.
No, it's been great chatting. It's good. I mean, when I wrote the book, in 2001, 2002, a reflection of your life. I mean, when you're doing it, it's just week on, it's always about next week. Because you've done that, and you might have won, but you want to win next week, or you might have had a bad result, so you want to do better. So it's all about next week, and you don't actually get a chance to reflect that often. So it's quite neat to reflect, and actually these are only for close vision. I don't have to wear glasses.
It's just so you can see me.
No, it's been fun chatting. Like for myself, just you get a chance to reflect, and it's cool.
Perfect. The main thing is that you enjoy it. What we'll do when the video ends, we'll press stop, but we have just to leave it running just for a little bit for the video to upload. But while we do that, ladies and gentlemen, the brilliant Aaron Slight.
Cool. Thank you very much. No, it's been awesome.
Well, a huge thanks to Aaron and to Pete Donaldson for putting us in touch. The Kiwi Journo did a great job in making the introduction, and I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. Aaron's such a great guy. We wish him all the very best, and maybe one day we'll get him back on the show again, because I reckon there's a few more stories in there, don't you? Next week, if everything works right on the off-track time machine, we'll be sitting down at Alton Park with Ray Stringer. Finally, we get a chance to sit down to the engine tuner and racer and see what his stories are from the better days of racing, where men were men and, well, small animals were scared, probably. So until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for listening and for watching. And please do look after yourself. Until next week with Ray Stringer, bye-bye.